Welcome. In this video, we'll be exploring how do we work with difficult emotions and how do we use mindfulness skills, mindfulness awareness in meeting challenging emotions and patterns that we may come in contact with in our everyday life. I first want to just explore that when we look at these kinds of difficult emotions, that they tend to move in one of two directions. So when they go towards what we call laxity, or when the mind starts to avoid and deny our feelings, this is what leads us to more depressed feelings. So we each need to think about, do I tend to deny my feelings? Do I tend to push feelings away? And this leads us more and more towards depression. And then the other direction is, do I tend to be someone who has a lot of thoughts and feelings? Do I have anxious thinking? Do I worry a lot? Does my mind become preoccupied with emotions? And this leads us to the other side of the emotional balance point, which is towards busyness and more distress, more anxious thinking. So our practice is to find a balance point, of being with our emotions in a healthy way. Buddha talked about the way we experience our emotions, and he describes it in three ways and uses the images of the rooster, the snake, and the pig to describe these three approaches that we have to our emotions and our experiences. The rooster is about the part of us when I desire something, when I get attached to something, when I become obsessed with something, when I feel like I need this in order to be happy in my life. And this is called the root of attachment and desire. I hold on to things. I want to have more of this kind of experience. The second is the snake, which is what he calls aversion, or the things that I want to push away. We're repulsed by snakes. We reject snakes. Shame and disgust, anger, fear, the things that I want to get away from and push away. These are the things that are associated with aversion, and these also lead to suffering. And the third is the pig that gets lost in the mud, and that in that mud starts to ignore what's really going on. And he would say that that's the root of all of them. That in some way, whatever is difficult, whatever we don't want to face, we tend to want to avoid and push away eventually. And it's through these three approaches to our emotions that we experience suffering. And so mindful awareness is actually a way to help us see our suffering more clearly, how to be with experiences with more awareness, and then eventually to choose a different road, to explore that feeling in a new way that perhaps won't lead to as much suffering. In my work as a psychotherapist, but also as a mindfulness and compassion trainer, it's working with people mostly at this level of difficult emotions. That's the majority of my work, because really that's what leads to the challenges. So Buddha had a way, we call him sometimes an early psychologist, that he was really working with how the mind works, which is the basis of psychology. So we looked at how to be with the mind in 4 different ways, which he called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So the first is learning how to be with your experience through the body. Mindful awareness of the body within the body, how the experience is experienced through the senses, through the 5 senses, how experience lands in the body. The second foundation are the feelings. Now, feelings are not the same as emotions as you and I think of them. Feelings are more a quality of how we experience things as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, which is neither. So a pleasant feeling is having that great evening and that great dinner or maybe a great experience of sex. Then those are all really pleasant experiences that we feel. And then the unpleasant ones are that fight I had, the reaction that I had, the difficulty I'm having in making a decision right now. These are what we call unpleasant. And then there are experiences that are neither of those. Like this table, for example, is really neutral. I don't have an experience one way or another of my experience at the table. Buddha also talked about these experiences as worldly ones, and then he said uncommon experiences are things like what we experience in meditation. There's a kind of bliss or really pleasant experience of calmness that we feel in meditation. And then there's the unpleasant experience of meditation when I'm trying to practice and my mind is really distracted and I have an unpleasant meditation. The third foundation of mindfulness is called mindful awareness of the mind, or consciousness, where we're learning to see that the observing awareness, the mind itself, is the object that sees our experience. And Buddha in Abhidharma talks very specifically about, well, what is the mind that we're talking about in mindfulness? And divides the mind into two elements. So the first element of the mind is what's called the observing awareness, right? You're listening to me, and your mind is the one that's listening to the words that I'm speaking. But your ears and your eyes are also involved in how you receive it. So these two parts are also recognized in what the second element, which is the mental state itself. So as the mind is practicing mindfulness, the mind is aware of coming back to the breath, and the state that you're experiencing then is mindfulness. Or the mind is aware of worrying, and so the state then is worry. So these two are necessary to understand that we have a part of the mind that's aware and then a part of the mind that's experiencing. And we're learning how to be with both of those. And the final foundation is the objects, the many different objects or different mental states or experiences, whether we're experiencing something through our ears, whether we're experiencing through memory, or whether it's an emotion that we're experiencing. Each one of these is a different object. And so through mindful awareness, we're learning how to focus on each of these objects. So the next question is, so where do these emotions come from? Where do these unpleasant feelings arise from? Now, I'm not saying your childhood is the cause of it, but it's through our childhood experiences, through the various experiences that we've had in life, that our experience of emotions and our early experiences shape our patterns or habits of how we experience things, and even affect our belief systems about ourselves. There's something called ACEs, which means adverse childhood experiences, and you can actually take the ACE test to see how many of these kinds of adverse conditions or experiences have you touched upon. It's really impossible that we haven't had one touch upon us, because we're all human. So the first are personal adverse experiences, where we may have experienced physical, verbal, or sexual kinds of abuse experiences. And the second personal type is we may have experienced physical or emotional neglect, where our parents, as much as they loved us, were not able to meet the needs that we needed. And then the second way is that externally we may have also experienced adverse, challenging experiences. We may have experienced racism or bullying. We may have experienced the death and loss of a loved one. We may have had an alcoholic parent. We may have had experiences where a divorce has happened or where we've felt abandoned. So there's many different kinds of experiences and events. A parent who has mental illness or is challenged, or there's a great loss that that parent experienced. So all of these become experiences that affect how you and I come to be with our emotions and how we feel about ourselves. Lawrence Heller, in his work on developmental trauma, looks really closely at how these experiences affect how our emotions form, how we feel about our self-image, our self-confidence, but also how we form relationships. Our early experiences shape how do I experience connection, how do I attune with my emotions, how do I trust my emotions and others' emotions, and how I can experience autonomy or my own boundaries between myself and others. And then finally, it affects how we experience our sense of love, how we experience our sexuality, and also how love in our heart is experienced. So these are powerful things that we can come to understand through looking at our emotions. And in the work of Tara Brach, she actually talks about this as a radical process. and in her book, Radical Acceptance. And another author brings this into focus in his book called Radical Responsibility by Fleet Maull. So the radical is that we turn towards these difficult emotions. That's the radical part. That rather than avoiding them or becoming overwhelmed by these difficult emotions, we're learning how to be with them, how to reflect on them, to realize where they come from, and then learn some skills of how to be with them. Tara Brach uses a method called RAIN, as this acronym describes 4 different stages of how to be with a difficult emotion or difficult state. The first one is to recognize it. I'm scared right now. And to accept it. And as you accept that, rather than judging it or pushing it away or shaming myself for that experience, accept it. Then next, investigate it. Where is this emotion in my body? How am I experiencing the thoughts that are associated with this feeling? And then finally, the N is to nurture, to offer self-compassion, to really give yourself something in this place. So I'd like us to explore in a short guided practice one way of exploring being with a difficult emotion, and to use this as a way to begin to be aware of to learn some skills that we can develop in everyday life in being with difficult times. So I invite you to come to however you come to sit, to just find yourself come home to a comfortable sitting position. And as you do that, let everything settle into the moment. Let your awareness come into the body. And as you come into the body, you come into awareness. You become mindful, you become aware. Focus your attention for a moment. Feel the ground beneath you, the earth. It's supporting us all the time. Feel the spine supporting you, the strength of the spine. It lengthens up and out of the base of the body, out of the ground, like a tree. Become aware of the top of your head and let everything relax. The skull, the scalp, let the face, let the eyes, jaw, let the shoulders relax. And let that relaxation extend right down through your torso, belly, your hands and arms. So there's a sense of settling inward and relaxing. As you settle here, notice how you are. And begin to pay attention to the quality of your breath and to your inner experience in this moment. Notice how you are. Right now may be a neutral feeling, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Or the relaxation of just being in the present moment may feel very calming, peaceful, and pleasant to you. Or there may be an emotion that's really present for you, or a body sensation that you experience as unpleasant. So just notice and bring your attention to the breath now, so that we are always anchoring into the posture and into the breath in these contemplative practices. All of the things that we're learning is through this contemplative or reflective awareness, our ability for the mind to observe our experience. And rather than following and becoming overwhelmed or pushing away our experience, we're learning some practices to steady the course of being with our inner experience. And with practice, developing a loving and kind approach to being with them. So we anchor ourselves with the breath. We can always stop at any point and come back. So the breath is always our anchor. And as you observe the breath coming in and out, I want to invite you to recall an experience from the recent past. Maybe it was a conflict or a distressing situation, a difficult email, conversation that you had, a disappointment, maybe a hurt. Don't pick something really huge that happened, just something in the recent past which may have been upsetting for you. And as you recall that event, the first thing I want you to do is to notice your body if you can. How does this experience, this memory, how is it felt in the body? And stay connected to your breath. Perhaps there's some tension that you can notice. Often with reactions, we feel them. It increases the heart rate, or there's tightness in the belly, or chest, or jaw. As you think about this situation, there's a level that we also notice different feelings that are present for us. What's the tone of this? Can you sense the unpleasantness? Perhaps there was hurt, disappointment, irritation, even fear. Notice whatever feelings may be present for you here. And also, as you reflect and remember this experience, there's a storyline. What's the story or the thoughts that are strongest for me here? As we encounter a difficult experience, we begin to notice these three layers: the sensation of the experience in the body, the emotions, more at the heart level, and then also the head level, our thoughts about it. So here we're just investigating and seeing all the different layers of an experience. These three layers. And so for a moment, as you look upon this situation, I invite you to, how can you offer yourself some kindness here? What would be a supportive thing to offer yourself around this? What kind of kindness? Perhaps if there's self-judgment there, how can you turn the self-judgment around and let that go? If there's still reaction, how can you offer yourself something calming, a reflection? What's a way that I might work with this in a way that would be more beneficial for me? Here we're just inviting ourselves to pause even, learning to just open our heart to the experience and be less judgmental of ourselves or less judgmental of others, depending on the situation. And remember to come back to your breath. Have you forgotten that? To stay grounded that as we work with these kinds of experiences, we're learning how to reflect and observe more, to be less reactive, to be less judgmental, to offer ourselves some calmness, some kindness, and even compassion. We could even just say, I care that that was difficult for you, as an act of kindness. I care that that experience was difficult for you. So I invite you just to let that all go now and bring your attention back to the breath. And really anchor your breath on your breath so that you let this experience fully go. And even notice whether there's a part of the mind that wants to hang on to the experience, and really practice gently letting go. Really bring your attention home to the breath, in and out. Come back and home to the moment and rest in this state for a few moments. Working with these emotions and finding skills that we can learn how to pause, how to reflect, and see actually what's happening in our experience can be a new way of looking at how we work with our emotions. But it's important to remember that working with difficult emotions may also mean that there's also other issues that are happening for us. And in my experience, at some point, we all will likely need to go talk to somebody and to get support on how we work with some of these difficult states. And it's important to not feel that that's a weakness or that we're less than because we need some support or help to talk to somebody. So remember that if that's your situation, that it's perfectly fine to reach out for support, whether it's from family or friends or seeking a professional, a therapist or counselor to help you to work with them. But hopefully these techniques can help you to find more ease. Thanks so much. Bye for now.